As a kid growing up in Towns County, the fair was always something that everybody looked forward to. I can remember going to it. My daddy would work out west in the mines, and he would come home in time for the fair with socks full of silver dollars. They used silver dollars out there. We would take those silver dollars and spend them all at the fair. and so in the course of time, I have met somebody that knows as much about the fair as anybody I know. Her name is Vonda Morton. She's an 8th generation Georgia native with southern roots like North Carolina and Virginia, like all of us, stretching back to the American Revolution, like all of us. She lives in her paternal grandparents' home on the 6th generation family farm in Lawrence County, Georgia. Currently a freelance editor and state and federally licensed wildlife rehabilitator, specializing in raptors. I said raptors. She has previously worked as a college instructor and an administrator and a journalist. She obtained her BS and MA in history from Georgia College and her PhD in geography from Greenwich University. She grew up attending the Georgia Mountain Fair and became addicted to it and is delighted to have a small role in its history. We welcome Vonda and her mother back there, all the way from Lawrence County, Georgia.
Okay, as Jerry said, I have attended the Georgia Mountain Fair throughout most of my life. My grandparents, my paternal grandparents, came home from a North Georgia vacation in the probably early to mid 1970s, and they told my parents about a fair over there in the town in the Hiawassee High School. And so, of course, my parents wanted to see what it was about. They were there at the next year's fair, and we were at pretty much every fair after that. My parents and my sister and I. And so in the late 1980s, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do my master's thesis on, the fair was just, it was a logical choice because nothing had been done other than back in the late 50s, maybe early 60s, I can't remember the year. I'm a historian, I don't do years. Henry Haddon had done a thesis on the fair as an educational program. And so that was all that had been done. Nothing had been done on the actual history of the fair, which for a historian, that's a gold mine. You found something that's nobody's researched to death. So, of course, the fair people were absolutely, y'all are my family. My fair people here are my family. So they're my extended family. And so when I started working on this, they have been extremely, extremely cooperative. Of course, the rest is, as they say, history. The Georgia Mountain Fair Incorporated has really, I think, set out to disprove the old maxim, you can't be all things to all people. Look at the extensive list of activities and exhibits, and they grow yearly. So there really is something pretty much for anybody. There's something to interest just about anybody who would want to come up to the fair, to the fairgrounds. The fair began as a 3-day agricultural exposition attended primarily by residents of Hiawassee and the mountains around Towns County. It gradually extended to a 12-day celebration of mountain crafts, heritage, and music attended by visitors from around the world until it scaled back to 9 days in 2013 and to 2 consecutive weekends in 2024. The effect of the fair on Towns County has been and continues to be enormous. The fair and its outgrowths provide many full and part-time jobs for county residents, as well as bringing in ever-increasing tourist dollars. Another benefit is a little less tangible. It's given the people of North Georgia in general, not just Towns County, but North Georgia in general, an increased awareness of and pride in their heritage. While Georgia's most unique fair it showcases the rich traditions and lifestyle of the North Georgia mountains, its own history provides a fascinating glimpse at the results of one man's dream, a dream that was made reality through total community involvement and cooperation. At the same time, it offers a unique opportunity to observe ongoing attempts to preserve and maintain a unique and varied heritage that might otherwise have been lost to the unhalting march of progress. The man behind the dream was Herbert Tall Tabor. He was the founder of the first insurance company in the mountains. He was actually from Gilmer County. His insurance route frequently took him to Hiawassee, and he ate at the same restaurant that a lot of the Towns County, that the Towns County Line Clubs used for its meetings. And he was present for so many of those meetings that he was invited to join the club as a non-resident member. Shortly after joining, Tabor, who was apparently quite energetic, became president of the club. One of his first suggestions was that the Lions do something besides meet to eat. Well, that's what a lot of clubs do. They just meet. The something that should be done actually presented itself again to Tabor as he listened to the continuing discussion of his fellow club members and the town leaders about what Hiawassee could do about its nothing future and the dwindling population. Because, in any small town, small county, the young folks usually graduate and leave. Why not organize a fair? This would mean that you'd have to have the whole community involved. It would build up morale, and it might even bring in some tourists to beef up the economy. So the Lions Club, which at that time was 40 members, decided in early 1950 to sponsor a small agricultural fair and appointed Tabor as the chairman of the fair committee. In 1950, Towns County had a really poor economy. Cultural and social activities for county residents were limited almost entirely to church and school functions. There were no industries to speak of, there was no railroad, very little arable land, and many of the roads were still unpaved. So with those conditions, it's kind of understandable that the residents of Towns County were a little less than enthusiastic. They were not opposed. They were just full of self-doubt. Who's going to travel these rough mountain roads to come to a little agricultural fair in a town that's unheard of outside of the mountain area? Well, there were two people who did plunge into the plans with great enthusiasm. That was Towns County Extension Agent Ian Nicholson and his wife. Mr. Nick, as he was known, suggested that the fair have exhibits of traditional mountains lifestyles, crafts, progress, things that progress was making obsolete. He and his wife volunteered their services to round up these exhibits, as well as to secure other volunteers and to promote the fair. Mr. and Ms. Nick traveled many miles over the mountain roads, and they traveled these miles basically because phone calls were pretty much out of the question. Most folks didn't have phones in 1950. Their efforts produced modest success. They got some exhibits, they got some workers, enthusiasm was drummed up, but all of this would have been in vain if you didn't have a site for the fair. Permission was sought and granted to use the Towns County High School and its facilities at no cost to the fair directors beyond the payment of utilities. So now you've got the enthusiasm, you've got the exhibits, you've got a site, a date can be set. And the last week in August was chosen. It was later discovered that the Towns County High Schools, the Towns County school system in general, usually opened that week, but in a gesture of support for the fair, the schools postponed their opening for a week. The 1950 fair was a weekend event, 3 days. There were only a few crude exhibits. They did have a little midway operated by Mad Cody Fleming. There was no admission charge during the day, but they charged 25 cents at night, to pay for the carnival. And to everybody's surprise, the fair was actually well attended. Remember, this is the first time the fair has ever been held, 1950. And between 1,500 and 2,000 people showed up for this 3-day event. And that was not just from Towns County, that was from surrounding counties as well. So after operating expenses were met, the fair cleared $1,000. Now, that's not a lot of money to fund the Towns County, the Lions Club projects for the next year and, pay for another fair. But the decision was made based on the success to have another fair. And so they began planning. And after the moderate success of the 50 fair for the 1951 fair, enthusiasm was really high, and the plans progressed smoothly. This one was going to be a week-long event. If you can get 1,500 to 2,000 people for 3 days, let's try a week and see what happens. So a lot of decisions were made as they're moving into the plans for the second fair concerning the fair's purpose and its operational procedures. They would have the midway as a yearly feature because every county has its little county fair. Well, the Towns County Fair would be combined with the Georgia Mountain Fair. No commercial exhibits would be allowed. Any profits from the fair would be channeled back into the community through various Lions Club projects. The fair was to serve both educational and entertainment purposes. Education through the exhibits and the demonstrations, and entertainment through live music, the carnival, and there were various competitions that were held as well. The second Georgia Mountain Fair saw approximately 12,000 attendees. The fair was such a success, in fact, that the people of the several counties participating demanded that it be made an annual event. The Towns County Lion Club, realizing the growth potential of their fair, agreed that it should be an annual event, and they filed a request for incorporation, which was granted on March 17, 1952, by Towns County Superior Court Judge John E. Frankham. The papers of incorporation established the fair as a nonprofit corporation whose purpose was the encouragement of education, farming, forestry, civic progress, to aid worthy causes, to assist persons in need or distress, and to generally benefit the community and mankind. I had to read that and make sure. I had to look down and make sure, because you want to include all of that. A copy of the incorporation papers was filed with Secretary of State Ben W. Fortson, and the Georgia Mountain Fair Incorporated became a legal entity for a 35-year period, with, of course, the option of renewal at the end of that period. They've renewed a few times since then. The fair would be administered by a board of directors comprised of members of the Towns County Lions Club, and the first board was the 1952 officers of the club. The fair continued to expand its exhibits and attractions. More exhibit space was reserved, so all the school buildings now at the old Towns County High School were being used for the fair, for exhibit space. Do any of y'all remember, that's a stupid question, I'm sure most of you remember, going into the high school and the classrooms were set up as exhibit spaces. It was really impressive. 1952 also saw the addition of the annual country music show, which became a major attraction for fairgoers, and we'll discuss that in a little more detail a little later. But when the gates closed on August 30th, ending the third fair, total attendance was estimated at 16,000. So the Towns County Herald proclaimed in one of its editorials, "We're now on the map. Each year the fair will grow bigger and better, and it's good for us all." And I would say that was a pretty good prediction. In '53, further improvements were made to ensure a smoother operation of the fair. They had created a loading area for the exhibitors, vehicles were banned from the fairgrounds, and a larger speaker stand was constructed. The Towns County Herald, speaking for its readership, boasted, "This is our fair, the people of North Georgia." Well, the people of North Georgia surely were pleased with the publicity their fair received in 1953. The Army Signal Corps sent a mobile shortwave transmitter so that communications with servicemen anywhere around the world could be engaged in by members of the fair itself, by fairgoers. The Line magazine ran a feature story on the fair, as did Standard Oil Company's Scenic South. The Atlanta Journal and Constitution Sunday magazine also published an article on the fair. These three publications alone reached a total readership of over 3 million. So this kind of publicity had a very positive effect on attendance. So in 1953, the attendance jumped to an estimated 20,000. Some 26 states, District of Columbia, and 6 foreign countries, including England, Greece, and Malaysia, were represented. E.C. Nicholson became the second president of the Georgia Mountain Fair in 1954. He contracted with Holly Show's Carnival Company to do the midway, and he added several county agricultural workers to the fair's board of directors. In early August, the Towns County Herald described the process of transforming the high school into the fairgrounds. Decorations in purple and gold, Lions Club colors, booths, tables, air conditioning equipment, huge ventilator fans were put into place. Fences will be built, grounds cleaned, the livestock area prepared, and a public address system installed. This year, for the '54 fair, approximately 20 officials from countries including Taiwan, the Philippines, Thailand, and Brazil were special guests at the fair. The exhibits they viewed included, and this is a long list, so again, let me make sure, agriculture, horticulture, forestry, livestock, poultry, antiques, curios, home products, needlework, arts, and crafts. Now remember, 1950, very few of the roads leading into Hiawassee were paved. 1954, every road leading into Hiawassee had been paved to handle fair traffic. Attendance for the 1954 fair was 26,000. 26 Georgia counties represented, in addition to those foreign countries that I mentioned. Visitors who signed the fair's guest registers came from a total of 36 states, and tourist facilities for a 50-mile radius around Hiawassee were strained by this influx of people. Hiawassee's small agricultural fair had expanded to such an extent by 1957 that 19 committees were required to oversee the planning and operations. These committees handled aspects of the fair ranging from getting lumber and supplies to checking in exhibits. A fiddler's convention was added in 1958 to this list of attractions for the fair, and the crowds continued to come. Roy A. Flint, who was the state highway planning engineer in 58, said that over 41,000 cars entered Hiawassee during the week of the fair. By 1961, the fair was known nationwide as one of the outstanding events of the year, and it was generally acknowledged that the volunteer workers who gave so much of their time to the fair were in large part responsible for its success. Historically, the Georgia Mountain Fair has relied heavily on its volunteer workers, and they never fail to perform. High attendance was expected at the outset of the '62 fair, and this expectation was fulfilled. The last night of the fair, 7,000 people entered the gates, and total attendance was estimated at over 40,000. The fair's economic impact was felt as far away as Gainesville and even into North Carolina. New President Bob Anderson, well, Robert L., but everybody called him Bob, compared the rapidly growing fair to having an elephant by the tail. The Chattanooga Times printed a glowing article on the fair, emphasizing its lack of commercialism, and concluded the Georgia Mountain Fair thrives on the conditions which in turn it helps to create, a happy circle in operation. Bob Anderson was a very vigorous leader, very dedicated leader. He was enthusiastic, he loved the fair, he lived the fair, and he encouraged that same zeal in the people who worked around him. In recognition of this fact, he was appointed president of the fair again in 1963, a position he held until his death in 1983. The 50-cent admission fee, which had only been charged previously after 6 p.m., was now being charged during the day. And I told Jerry and Doug this earlier, this brings about a funny story, and I'm pretty sure that Steve Holmes is the one who told me this, but when they put the fence up to keep people out without paying their admission during the day, a bunch of teenage boys decided they were gonna get in free anyway. So they climbed over the fence, and two of the guys who were supposed to be doing security were standing there and looked at each other like, "Don't stop them and make them pay." They'll pay tomorrow, they just climbed through poison ivy. I love that. Was that somebody in here? So there was a girl in it too.
That road up back behind us, climbed over the wall, and I was in.
There you go. As attendance continued to increase each year, the strain on the support facilities and the wear caused by streams of visitors through the Towns County High School began to take their toll. There weren't enough restrooms, for one thing. It was difficult to build temporary facilities that were adequate. Desks, books, other equipment, teacher supplies were all suffering from having been moved yearly to make room for the fair. Also, as I recall, the high school grounds were extremely muddy. And Doug, I believe you're the one who told me that after each fair they would have barrels full of shoes, where people they get stuck in the mud, and rather than even try to get their shoe back, they just walk off barefooted. So, there was a definite strain on the facilities at this point. And in '65, the fair drew over 60,000 visitors from 33 states and 14 foreign countries. And this was expected to continue to increase yearly. The fair was outgrowing the Towns County High School. Something had to be done. So the Lions Club began looking for a larger permanent site for the Georgia Mountain Fair. Unfortunately, land acquisition in Towns County is not an easy process. Over half the land in the county is owned by the U.S. Forestry Service, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the state of Georgia. The acreage the Lions wanted, which was on the shores of Lake Chatou, just west of Hiawassee, was TVA land. And the Land Management Division of the TVA at that time was reluctant to release any land. So the Lions began negotiating with the TVA, but this was a very slow and cumbersome process, as is the case anytime you're dealing with the government. Meanwhile, the fair is bursting at the seams and has continued to gain recognition. The attractions for 1966 included a cloggers convention, a horse show, gospel singing, the first annual art show, a feeder pig show, and a cattle show. That's in addition to the regular features like the parades, the flower show, the country music show, and the hog rifle shooting match. Also, in '66, North Georgia's largest watermelon cutting of the year was sponsored by U.S. congressional candidate Zell Miller. So, Zell was a big supporter of the fair. He was a big supporter of anything that promoted the North Georgia mountains. In 1967, the fair was awarded first place at the Small Fairs of Georgia Division at the annual meeting of the Georgia Association of Agricultural Fairs. This year, a tent was also erected for the cloggers convention, the gospel singing, the country music, and the square dancing. The fair continued to add to its program. In October, the first fall festival was held. Y'all wondered when I was going to get to something besides just the Georgia Mountain Fair. The fall festival was held under the new tent, and it was a fundraiser to help rebuild the Towns County Hospital, which had been destroyed by fire the previous winter. Like the first fair, the first fall festival was a weekend event, but unlike the 1950 fair, the 1967 fall festival concentrated on music, featuring country music, clogging, and a gospel sing. And again, this weekend event proved so popular that the fair decided to make it an annual event and see if something similar in the spring might pay off. Accordingly, in the spring of 1968, the first spring music festival was held. It was another weekend event, country, bluegrass, and clogging. By August, the fair had some 11 permanent exhibits ranging from the moonshine steel to pottery making and a quilting bee. Arts, crafts, antiques, home canned goods. The midway was provided by Georgia Amusement Company. A new campground opened in October, just in time to provide additional sites for visitors to the fall festival. In 1969, the Nicholsons, citing ill health, retired from their jobs with the Towns County Farm Bureau and curtailed their involvement with the fair. This year, in 1969, the fair featured a professional country music show, in addition to the regular gospel singing and the amateur country music show. And all these performances were still being held under the tent. Conway Twitty was the first professional country musician to perform at the fair for a fee of $1,500. Don't you wish you could get them that cheap now, Hilda? The gospel sing featured the Florida Boys, the Oak Ridge Boys, back when they were still a gospel group, and 15-year-old gospel singer Steve Sanders, who later became part of the Oak Ridge Boys. By 1969, the Lions Club was also growing impatient with the red tape they were facing with the TVA. So they purchased 59 acres east of Hiawassee and began making very slow improvements, even as they continued negotiations with the TVA, because they really wanted the land west of Hiawassee. So as they continued these improvements on the 59 acres they purchased in '71, the fair expanded to 10 days in 1971 to accommodate the ever-increasing crowds. And by this point, attendance was running about 100,000 yearly. In 1972, the 22nd annual Georgia Mountain Fair was filmed by the Georgia Educational Television Network, which is now, of course, known as Georgia Public Broadcasting. And if anybody knows anybody at GPB who can get a copy of that, I'm sure we'd all love to have it. I have tried to contact them for 40 years now, and they ignore me. The special they filmed was later broadcast as a 1-hour special called the Georgia Mountain Fair. It gave viewers a brief tour of the fair's attractions, interviews with some participants in various competitions, and that sort of thing. But it would be great if we could find a copy of it somewhere. If anybody This is the historical side. Surely somebody here knows somebody at GPB that we can contact. Over 125,000 people attended the 1972 fair. And still the lines were moving very slowly with their land improvements because they were still negotiating with the TVA for the land west of town. And their perseverance finally paid off in 1973. The TVA changed property management personnel, and on January 11th, 1973, the land that the lines originally wanted was signed over to Towns County to be used for public recreation purposes. On January 24th, 1973, the Towns County Lion Club met with the TVA officials in the Young Harris College cafeteria for a formal presentation of 161 acres of land bordering Lake Chateau to Towns County on a permanent easement. The county, in turn, leased this land to the fair. Well, it's a little more complicated than that, but we don't have all night, so that's the basics. So the Lions Club was just elated. They sold the 59 acres east of town to the Towns County Board of Education for less than the cost of the improvements, and that became the site for the new Towns County Comprehensive High School. And so that's where the fair would have been had the TVA not cooperated. Since the TVA finally cooperated, the grounds you now know as the fairgrounds were what we finally ended up with. Terry Taylor, who's here tonight, hey Terry, is a native of Towns County and a graduate of Georgia Tech. He was hired to develop the land. He was the fair's first full-time employee. So with his hiring, the plans for the construction of the Georgia Mountain Fair's permanent home began. Improvements and construction on the total acreage took between 5 and 6 years because the work was done in spurts as Terry was able to obtain funding. So for some 6 weeks after the close of the 75 fair, weekly meetings were being held with planners, consultants, engineers, architects, builders. They're planning the new fairground, hoping that they could be in the new fairground by 76. By October of 76, the land was being cleared, sites shaped up for the Pioneer Village, the main exhibit building, comfort stations, roads, parking lots. And, again, tentative plans were to hold the Spring Festival and the fair on the new site in 76, but, it was acknowledged that it could take months and even years to complete the project. Terry had estimated that the fairgrounds should take around a year and about $474,000 to complete, but there were delays in obtaining the additional funding, so the construction took a little longer than expected, and the fair was still at the high school in 1977. Once the needed funds were made available, the actual construction of the fairgrounds took less than 12 months, and a lot of the construction was done on a volunteer basis. Just 2 months before the 1978 fair, construction was completed, and the fair moved to its new home. Bob Anderson said it's the best feeling in the world to know that we won't have to rush in here the morning after the fair and take down every single building. The new grounds boasted a 1,000-site parking lot, campground, Pioneer Village, several exhibit areas, and the ribbon-cutting ceremony was held in the rain on Friday, August 4th, 1978. Those attending the ceremony included, of course, Terry Taylor, Fair President Bob Anderson, Ms. Herbert Tabor, and Hiawassee Mayor Jim Brown, and other officials from Towns County and surrounding areas were also present. Now, music, obviously, by this point had become a major attraction of the fair, so part of the new grounds had been designated as the site for a music hall. In 1978, though, all the musical performances and dance exhibitions were still held under the large tent. Plans were still underway for that permanent hall, though. And I remember interviewing Terry about this. The basic plan was to try and recreate the open tent-like feeling. The first idea was a big open pavilion-style building, but that wasn't really practical. So then they decided to have an enclosed building with a lot of doors to give that same open feeling. So Terry had spent several days at Butler Building Headquarters in Missouri talking to the design people, trying to see what they could come up with that would suit the fair's needs. It was eventually decided that the main auditorium would be about 150 by 150 feet, steel girders 7 feet tall, 7 feet thick as supports, and there would be no posts, no columns in the audience section, which would slope gently downward toward the stage. And then they would add buildings at both ends to provide a backstage area and a concession and restroom area. So you've got this, it's like this diamond kind of capped on opposite points. Groundbreaking ceremonies for the auditorium were held on Wednesday, April 25th, 1979, and they really pushed the construction to try and get through. Because the first show was planned for the 79 fair. The building was completed in late July, just in time for the opening of the fair in August. So it was, the first show in the new music hall was held on schedule in 1979. Now, every attempt was made to keep the building cost as low as possible, but the music hall cost $1 million to construct. So, and it was named Anderson Music Hall, of course, in honor of Bob Anderson. And it created a tremendous debt for the fair because it had been financed by a 40-year FMHA loan. So they needed a way to raise money to help repay this, and that means was the fair's music program. For several years, the fair had 2 or 3 acts, professional acts. Usually it was like a package show during the fair, and it had been really popular. So it seemed natural for the fair to begin booking 6 or 8 professional acts, during the actual run of the fair. And then the profits from these concerts could be used to pay off the music hall. Within a few years, these concerts had become so popular and so profitable that the decision was made to book Nashville acts about every 3 weeks from May to October, which would further aid in repaying the loan, in addition to, just basically providing more entertainment for the local area. Now, I mentioned the country music show earlier, the amateur country music show, and we're going to get back to that now. For 66 years, an even larger outpouring of amateur talent occurred on the last Friday night of the fair. It was set aside for the annual country music show, featuring some of the Hill Country's best pickers and singers. Now, this began actually in 1952 when Lion Howard Cunningham, who there are no words to describe that man's musical genius. I mean, he was talented, doesn't come close, but he was an amazing fiddler. He suggested this country music show as a way to highlight local old-time musicians. Had a really meager beginning, according to Cunningham, with several musicians performing under a shade tree near the old high school gym. But it was so popular that the fair directors decided to make it an annual event. Within 2 years of its inception, the annual country music show had garnered such a large audience that it was moved inside the gym to allow for more comfortable seating. Outgrew the gym, was moved to the school auditorium. Outgrew the school auditorium. So there were no larger buildings. It was moved out to the athletic field. A portable stage was constructed. 2,500 or so folding chairs were rented and later bought. And a tent was purchased to protect the audience and the performers from the elements. The tent was too small. So they tried to use 2 tents. Well, that didn't work. So the fair had one of the largest tents in the Southeast specially made for this show. It remained under the tent until 1979, when a final move placed it in its permanent home, the Anderson Music Hall. Of course, by about 2000, attendance for and participation in the country music show began to decline. By 2018, it had been dropped from the roster because it just wasn't getting the participation that they needed. Now, in 2000, the fair celebrated its 50th anniversary with a gala attended by fair employees, volunteers, and the public. The night opened with a performance by the staff band, followed by a speech by Fair Vice President J. William Denton. Denton acknowledged the contributions of the community and various agencies that cooperated to make the fair a reality each year, and he offered a brief outline of the fair's founding, stating, "We were as rural and remote as you could get. There was no particular reason to notice us, but we had a community everybody was proud of. We didn't have any models to follow, and we sort of put it together on our own." In the process, the fair's founders increased tourism to the entire North Georgia area. Now, far from resting on their laurels with these impressive accomplishments, the Georgia Mountain Fair officials continued to refine and add to their lineup and their awards. Throughout its 75 years, the fair has experienced numerous outgrowths. Some have been wildly successful, some not as well received. It's also won a plethora of awards. As the 20th century ended and the 21st century began, fair officials continued to seek further additions to the fair lineup that would promote tourism to towns and surrounding counties and lend further credence to the slogan, "The Showplace of the Mountains," which was coined by Bob Anderson and it's displayed over the entrance to the fairgrounds. In 1997, the Spring Music Festival was renamed the Rhododendron Festival in order to better emphasize and publicize the fair's rhododendron garden along the shores of Lake Chatou. This is a result of the Rhododendron Festival. It's a result of the 1982 donation of 900 rhododendrons by Fred and Hazel Hamilton from their property in Towns County. In 1922, the Rhododendron Festival, which had been 2 weeks in April, expanded to include early May as well to take full advantage of both the blooming rhododendrons and the mountain laurels. Gardens creator Catherine Lukenbach, who we had a long conversation today, was excited with the announcement. It doesn't pay for two people enthused about the fair to get together. We'll turn out the lights on people. She was excited with the announcement of the expansion. My vision is actually Fred Hamilton's vision. He wanted this to be a showcase for the rhododendrons, and it definitely is. If you've not been to the gardens, you really need to take a stroll through them. It's gorgeous. The May through October concerts, which have now expanded to, basically the whole year now. It's not just that one little period. Now you've got weekend concerts pretty much every month. Provide an additional economic boost to the area, source of entertainment for area residents. And while they were strictly country acts to begin with, fair manager Hilda Thomason saw the potential in offering a wider variety of music, and in 2015 began incorporating classic and southern rock acts into the concert schedule as well to try and draw more people. Hilda said, we like to offer a variety of music, so we added classic rock and will continue to do this. Classic rock really does well for us, and I would say, based on attendance, that it definitely is paying off. This did widen the fair's already substantial fan base, and these concerts do tend to sell out very quickly. Some of the acts that have performed during these concerts include 38 Special, Leonard Skinner, Peter Noon, Blackberry Smoke, Three Dog Night, Marshall Tucker Band, Colt Ford, and there's more, but those are just some of the most recent that I remembered. Another highlight of the fair certainly is the fair lineup is the Mountain Country Christmas and Lights, which debuted in 2016. Hilda decided that a light show would boost tourism in December because there's not a lot going on in the mountain area in December. So she approached then Commissioner Bill Kendall with the idea, which he loved, and he helped fund it using the county hotel and motel tax. Now, Towns County does provide some supplemental funding for most of the country throughout most of its existence, the Mountain and Christmas and Lights. The fair adds everywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 worth of new lights and equipment to keep it new, to keep it interesting, so that you don't see it once and never come back. People continue to come back year after year and bring other people with them. The goal is to add new lights and new attractions each year so that it doesn't become boring and static. Begins, of course, in Thanksgiving night, and then it's open every Thursday through Saturday afterward, and every night the week prior to Christmas. And of course, there are, in addition to the lights, exhibits in the main exhibit hall, the pet and zoo, crafts, foods. So you've got pretty much everything. It's been a very popular addition to the fair roster. 2022's estimated attendance was about 30,000 paid visitors. That does not include children under 12, who are, of course, admitted free. It also doesn't include the 2 days the fair opens to Towns Countyans only and to area nursing home residents for drive-through experience. And Hilda has said, and I definitely agree, that it's a really good family-oriented event that people can come to and enjoy at a reasonable cost. Now, the big four for the Georgia Mountain Fairgrounds would be the fair itself, the Rhododendron Festival, the Fall Festival, and the Mountain Country Christmas and Lights. But the fair all has something going on practically every weekend now, and some week-long events. So there's something to appeal to just about any interest. The Georgia Mountain Fair Yard Sale in April and September, Memory Lane Classic Car Show in April, BMW Motorcycle Rally in May, Hiawassee Highlands Festival in May, Georgia Mountain Fire and Smoke Cooking Festival in May, the Hiawassee Pro Rodeo in May and September. The list goes on. And of course, this year, the Highlands Festival has moved from Blairsville over to the fairgrounds, so that's a new addition as well. And the fair has also made other changes to make it easier to host events and make experience more comfortable for attendees. In 2004, plans were announced to fit Anderson Music Hall with central air and heat to make it more comfortable for attendees and for performers. State and federal grants, along with matching funds from the community, funded this project, and it only took 2 years. By July 2006, the project was completed. In 2006, the fair changed its logo as well to reflect its more omnidirectional focus, and in order to keep up with the changing times, created a website as well. And when social media became a thing, the fair added social media accounts too. Its Facebook page, the last I looked, had 64,000 followers and 56,000 likes, so not too shabby. Honoring those who led the fair in its early years is also important to the fair leaders. There are various roads throughout the fairgrounds that are named for some of these folks, and two of the significant early leaders, Dick Paris and Lois Anderson, widow of Bob Anderson, had a park within a little mini park within the fairgrounds named in their honor in 2011. Anderson Paris Pioneer Park is in the Pioneer Village. It's behind the general store. There's a small stage for performers. And at the park's grand opening, Hilda said, Dick is one of the ones who helped get the fair started. Lois has been a blessing for the fairgrounds over the years. Her husband, Bob Anderson, was the president of the fairgrounds at the time of his death in 1983. Lois and Bob have always cared so much about the fair. We're proud to honor Lois and Mr. Paris with a lasting legacy to let future generations know what they really mean to us all. Now, there's a plaque in Anderson Paris Pioneer Park that has information on both of these early fair founders. Now, in 2020, the fair faced a very unique challenge with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent global lockdowns. The majority of scheduled events were canceled, with only events that were held strictly outdoors taking place. So the weekend concerts, the fair itself, the fall festival were all canceled. But things like the Mountain Country Christmas and Lights were held as scheduled because they were outdoors. In lieu of the fall festival, the fairgrounds held a craft show over 2 consecutive weekends. And in an example of the fair's resilience, 2020 was also the debut year for the professional rodeo and the New Year's Eve fireworks, and both of those events have proven immensely popular with the public. Another addition to the fair roster, the Memory Lane car show, came about in 2021 as a fundraiser to begin raising money to replace the old bench-style seating in the music hall. The big church-style benches that were in the music hall had been there since its founding in 1979. And fair officials decided it might be time to modernize those a little bit, make them a little more comfortable for people. In fact, Hilda said, we want people to be more comfortable with the new formal cushioned seats and not so scrunched up on the benches, so everybody can have more space. The new seats have, cup holders for your drinks and so forth. Donations were accepted. People could dedicate seats to loved ones. They could have, a personalized plaque on the back saying that it was dedicated to, whoever they chose to dedicate it to. And further funds were raised by selling the old benches. So the new seating was in place by June of 2022. Now, Hilda is very much, Catherine and I were talking about this evening, you're very much like Bob Anderson. You live and love the fair. Hilda remains excited about the prospects for the fair's future. It's taken a huge team to make all this happen in the community, and people are leaving with lots of smiles. The primary objective of the fair is to bring people into the county to help all the businesses and help the county. We're a nonprofit organization, and our whole purpose of being in business is to promote tourism. Now, echoing Hilda's enthusiasm, the Towns County Herald editorialized, it's no secret that the fairgrounds produces high-quality events that draw people back year after year, which is a major boon to the area. There is no doubt that the fair has had a tremendous social and economic impact on towns and surrounding counties. If you look at its growth and development, you could also outline the social and economic process of much of the North Georgia area. The Georgia Mountain Fair has had and continues to have far-reaching positive effects. The tourist traffic from the fair, from the concerts, the festivals, and the other special events all combines to have an almost year-round impact, not just on Towns County, but as far away as Blairsville, Clayton, Dillard, and Helen, Georgia, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Hayesville and Murphy, North Carolina, as well as I-85 out of Atlanta. Tourism is the foremost industry in the North Georgia mountains, and the fair and its outgrowths have become a multi-million-dollar industry, a tourist industry for the area. The fair has been a major catalyst for the growth of the North Georgia area. The money brought in by the fair and its outgrowth remains in the North Georgia area. And this money from the tourist traffic is obviously of direct benefit to the community, but the fair itself also puts money back into the community because it is, after all, a nonprofit organization. All proceeds over the cost of operation are returned to the area through Lions Club projects, county recreation programs, and other projects and programs by church and civic groups, because a lot of the church and civic groups have booths set up during the Georgia Mountain Fair, during the Fall Festival, during the Mountain Country Christmas and Lights, and that's how they do a lot of their fundraising as well. The social impact of the fair has also been tremendous and overwhelmingly positive. Community awareness of and pride in the rich and varied history of the mountain region has increased. Awareness of their mountain heritage and the hardships endured by their ancestors has made area residents realize just how important their past is. The many attractions the fair offers through its various events throughout the year mean that visitors who spend their hard-earned money here do not feel cheated. Its offerings, the overwhelming positive response and the public has to them, tend to belie the old adage, you can't please everyone. Very few visitors to the fair or to any of its events will not find some part of it that pleases them, and quite often draws them back year after year. If you talk to people in the fairgrounds at any fair event, you're going to find people who, like me, have been coming since they were 8, 10, 12 years old, and they keep coming back, and they bring their children, and they bring their grandchildren. So it's a multi-generational thing. It just keeps growing with the families. Whatever it's attributed to, the fair's success is certainly powerful testimony to the wisdom of the North Georgia dwellers in telling their own story in their own way. Thank you.
Come one, come all to the Georgia Mountain Fair. Come and sit beneath our tent and breathe the mountain air. If you like country music and a touch of gospel too, I know you'll love the songs we sing. We do them just for you. Hiawassee's just a small town in the North Georgia mountain hills. You'd be surprised what you can find if you're looking for a thrill. Now people come from miles around just to hear us speak and sing. They call us Little Nashville, but we're not rich in fame. Cause we sing old songs, new songs, and a touch of gospel too. Anything that you request, we'll do it just for you. Songs like I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. And as we kneel in prayer, I hope to meet you there. Blessed Jesus, hold my hand. Young love, first love, sing my little Georgia road. Come on to the Georgia Mountain Fair. Come and sit beneath our tent and breathe the mountain air. If you like country music and a touch of gospel too, I know you love the country boys. Now here they are for you. Come one, come all to the Georgia Mountain Fair. Come and sit beneath our tent and breathe the mountain air. If you like country music and a touch of gospel too, I know you love Hiawassee. It's the place for you, yeah. I know you love Hiawassee. It's the place for you, yeah. it's the place for you. Know you love Hiawassee, it's the place for you. Know you love Hiawassee,